Hi, this is Ann Stoneson, a beginning counselor building your ideal internship. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about beware the grumps, or how to cultivate a smart internship support system. So this is for you if after hanging out with certain colleagues or coworkers, you notice feeling a little bit amped up or not quite yourself in a bad way after meeting with them. Or if you've got those certain people in your professional circle or maybe your personal life who say things like, "Oh, you can't make good money as an intern," or "You can't succeed in private practice, especially if you're private pay." Or if they say things like, "Well, internship, we just got to endure for the next 3,000 or 4,000 hours. That's just the way it is." Or if you just want to feel better about the internship process, maybe there's nobody in particular in your circle who you feel bad after meeting with, but you yourself are struggling to feel good about the process. This is for you. You're in the right spot. So, the title of this talk is Beware the Grumps. What do I mean by that? What am I talking about when I talk about grumps? So, I think the first thing I would say is that grumps are experts in two main things: why it won't work and why it's unfair. And grumpitude can take a couple of different shapes and forms. You can see it in people who have a lot of sarcasm or criticism about themselves or others. You can notice it in a kind of pessimism or sometimes even contempt. And you can also, sometimes it shows up as a kind of chronic worry or jittery kind of anxiety and fear. And in spite of the title of the talk, Beware the Grumps, I'm here to tell you that grumps aren't all bad. And in fact, we all have an inner grump. And it comes out whenever we're trying to do something challenging or important. And it can be characterized, this inner grumpitude, by a couple of things. It can showcase our self-doubt. It can also feed on the issue of imposter syndrome, when we feel like we're going to be found out at any moment and we surely don't belong with all of these other people around us who are doing this thing. Inner grumps can also represent a lot of fear, shame, and unworthiness. And it also, you'll see a lot of criticism that shows up with grumps. Inner critics are a big part of what the grump is all about, the grump persona, as it were. So I want you to know that I'm not wanting to demonize the grump in all of us. It's important to vent sometimes and to get things off your chest. The thing I want you to ask yourself, though, is when you are hanging out with somebody, do you find that your time is almost always consumed with venting? And if that's yes, that's true, do you leave the meeting feeling discouraged or do you feel uplifted? Because there are different kinds of venting, I find. There's the kind that you can stew in, and there's the kind where you get relief and feel lighter after having talked over a couple of things. So throughout this talk, I want you to remember that I don't have it in for the grumps. We all have that part. So this part, as much as any part that we have, deserves love and attention. I'm just hoping to decode it a little bit and for you to realize that if there are other grumps in your circle, how you might want to handle that, because we usually will stumble across at least a couple in our professional career. So, speaking of stumbling across grumps, I want you to take a minute to think about your inner circle and where your biggest grumps are, other than perhaps the inner grump that you've got. So size up your situation. Is it your supervisor? I've heard of this happening before. Or it could be maybe if you're in close quarters with other supervisees, maybe in a group. Or perhaps it's colleagues and coworkers. It could be some of your friends or even your family. Or if you're luckier, I like to think, you might be subject to a drive-by grumping, where you don't have to deal with the stress of someone's grumpitude over and over again, and you just see them once at a networking event, but it leaves you with a queasy feeling. So take a minute and think about it. Where are your biggest grumps? Where do they show up? And once you've gotten a sense of where your grumps are, I want you then to think about, okay, how to handle this situation. So grumps, the way that it works is that the grumpiness in each of us calls to each other. So I want you to notice your own stuff first. Notice your own inner grump and how it gets poked, prodded, or woken up when it's in the company of certain other people. And the best way to notice your own stuff, and this is true as far as your grumpitude, as I like to call it, or more generally, this is a good skill for clinical work. Notice your own stuff first, and the way to do that is to listen and label. So I've also heard this called name it to tame it, but basically notice what's coming up for you, and then name and label the process. Try and decipher if you can. Oh, wow, I notice I'm feeling anxious when I talk with so-and-so, and they're talking about how it's impossible to succeed in private practice. Woo, my stomach's in knots. So it's having that capacity for self-reflection, awareness, preferably in the moment, but even after the fact. Sometimes we're subject to a drive-by grumping and we don't even realize it until a couple of hours or maybe even a day later. So that's the first step for curing the grumps situation, is to notice your own stuff first. Listen and label. Notice what's coming up for you and name it. And then from there, you have an opportunity to trade up. You have an opportunity to trade from dread to possibility. An opportunity to move from the need for certainty and even control to curiosity. And to move from a place of fear to a place of hope. And this isn't going to be a static process where, oh, good for you, you're feeling hopeful at the moment, and that's just going to be how it is. This is something that you will do again and again and again, and that's just the part of doing something new and doing something courageous. So the second part of the talk today is about cultivating a smart support system. So the first piece is identifying the grumps and noticing it in ourselves and in the people around us and considering what that looks like. But then what do we do instead? Perhaps we find that actually we've got a lot of grumps embedded in our support system and we're kind of loath to get rid of what we've got because it's better than nothing. That's why it's really important to consider what alternatives there are and to think about what we'd like to put in place instead. So consider that first. What does safe space look like for you regarding your internship or anything worth undertaking that's requiring you to step outside of your comfort zone and to have some courage? What does safe and supportive space look like for you? I wrote down a few ideas. These are some things that work for me. Getting words of encouragement. Sometimes practical resources can be helpful. Although that's actually it works for me, but I'm actually a big fan of a good listener. I don't know why I put that at the bottom, when that's one of my favorite pieces of safe space. I guess that's why I love therapy so much. Honest feedback, when the timing's right, can also be helpful. And having someone who has self-awareness and curiosity, giving me their undivided attention, that's such a gift. Again, I think that's why I love therapy. But these are some of the components of safe space for me, but perhaps it will look different for you. So think first about what does safe space look like for you, and then who can hold that space for you, for your vision, whether it's completing your internship in a timely way, whether it's being able to secure a raise or ace that job interview or, beat the licensing exam or launch a private practice. Whatever your vision, think, who can hold this space for me? Who can offer this supportive space? And it's not going to be just one person you're inviting to this party, right? Hopefully, you'll have several people in your support system who can nourish maybe different parts of you, different needs that need to be met. So, I like for people to think outside of the box. I think a lot of times we tend to, like birds of a feather flock together. We look towards other therapists necessarily to provide this, and that's not necessarily a bad idea. I find that sometimes grumps can kind of congregate together, or your inner grump can get pulled out really easily if you're just hanging out with other people in the same phase and stage that you're in, because I think it can easily call forward feelings of competition among people. That's not always true. Perhaps I'm speaking to my own tender spot here about competition. But I find that for many people that can be the case, that if you're hanging around other people in sort of the same phase, that you naturally do this kind of comparison thing, and that can devolve into competition without you even meaning to. So think about who's invited to the support system of yours. Consider interdisciplinary support, so people outside of your field. So maybe you're looking for folks who are completing internships, but maybe they're in related lines of work. Maybe they're an acupuncturist or a massage therapist. Maybe they already have their own practice set up. And then thinking about mentorship within the field. So therapists, we tend to be pretty good listeners, but sometimes to avoid that issue I mentioned earlier about competition, you might look for people who are a few steps ahead or behind of you in the process. And remember, while we're usually thinking about, oh, who can mentor me or who can offer support, what's in it for me, you can actually get a lot from mentoring someone else. That can help actually consolidate some of your sense of confidence and the learning that you've already done. So even if you are in the midst of internship and you think, oh gosh, well, who could I possibly mentor? Somebody in school, they definitely are going to have a lot of questions about, well, how did you get your license, and how did you study for the licensing exam, and what was the hardest part about school, and how did you secure a job, and how much are you getting paid, if you don't mind asking, because I kind of want to know what the financial picture is going to look like when I graduate, right? So think not just about who can mentor you, but who you might be able to mentor. And then consider, too, that you can get support in lots of different ways. Maybe it's meeting with somebody over coffee, or maybe you're going online and reading some blogs or participating in some forums to get that support. And lastly, I want to empower you to create what you need. So take a look at your community. Perhaps there isn't a support system for folks like you. Maybe it's up to you to create that. Perhaps you are wondering if someone else is game and you're not quite sure if they're interested in the kind of supportive partnership you're proposing. Name what you're looking for. I'm interested in blah. Does that sound interesting to you? Could be as simple as that. And this third one's kind of tricky. It kind of depends on the relationship dynamics and, is this a friend or is it a family member? So considering where your efforts are best spent. But if you want to rehabilitate a grumpish relationship, you might say something like, I notice that when we get together, we tend to fill in the blank here. And I've been wanting to try Are you game? Because if it's another therapist that you're talking to, chances are good, I'd like to think, that they're aware of this dynamic too, and maybe they're open to change as well. And talking about it, making it conscious and deliberate. Hey, as much as I love getting together and venting with you, I sometimes leave our meetings feeling a little discombobulated. Or, I'd really love to trade ideas about what we could be doing to challenge ourselves as we move through internship. Or I'm looking for an accountability partner, somebody who will check up on me from time to time, and I'd be happy to offer the same courtesy. Would you like to try it? So start that conversation. Create what you need. Are you struggling with your inner grump? Are you looking for a free, supportive community that you can plug into? You're in luck. It already exists. Come to beginningcounselor.com to learn more about how we can support you in your internship. This is Ann Stoneson of Beginning Counselor, Building Your Ideal Internship. Thanks for taking the time. I hope you had fun with this. Feel free to check out other videos of ours if you like. And I hope to see you on another video soon.